Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic, we're going to be talking about Lethal Mirage Fulgerite Bladedancer. This is the first build that I have finished on my time back in last Epoch after taking a decently long break. So this build, right now, I'm going to state it right now, is a little unfinished. I didn't have any LP Fulgurites in the footage. I didn't have shock chance in the footage. I literally didn't have anything in the footage, to be honest. It's very bare bones. And this build is very solo viable thanks to the fact that Fulgurite shards are very easy to acquire and you technically don't even need them for the majority of the character's existence. They're just quality of life and, of course, the way that you invest into your damage. But this build is 100% solo approved. I played it from level 1 all the way to T4 Jurla. So if you're looking for a build like that, this is the build for you. So how does the build work, Dread? Well, Lethal Mirage is a skill that when you cast it, it will teleport you forward, make you immune for a few seconds, and then, of course, attack a bunch. Now, the original amount of mirages you get, like the amount of flicker strikes you get, it is about 6. You get 6 to begin with, and then you can add 4 from the tree, you can add 5 from shadows, and then you can get 2 on gear. And all of this combined leads to Lethal Mirage having a lot of single target damage. Now, the problem is, since you're immune when you're lethal miraging, the cooldown on this has to be pretty high. Otherwise, you would always be immune and you could abuse that. So EHG was nice enough to give us a way of reducing the cooldown through dual Fulgurite shards. Fulgurite shard essentially gives us a bunch of lightning damage, it gives us a bunch of cooldown, and it's pretty much our best in slot for this build because, of course, the cooldown recovery speed. This brings us all the way down to about a 6.5 second cooldown currently with my current gear. You can push it down further with some exalted cooldown recovery speed and, of course, some better Fulgurite shards than the ones I have because they do have rolls, by the way. So essentially, this makes it so that you can actually clear Monoliths with the skill. Because the problem is, the single target's never been an issue with Lethal Mirage. It's been clearing Monoliths because, your cooldown is so long, you have to wait to, 10 seconds to kill packs. Well, thankfully, thanks to everything that we do with this build, we can kill packs very easily. So one of the nodes inside Lethal Mirage that gives us a 0.2 seconds off the cooldown for every enemy that we kill. So right now, since we have a 0.65, we have a 6.5 second cooldown on our Lethal Mirage, it means that we can get up to 1.2 seconds shaved off after killing 6 things, right? Which means we go all the way down to like 5.3 seconds cooldown, which feels amazing while clearing Monoliths, because that's enough to clear a screen every so often, because in the current boss rushing meta, you don't necessarily need to like kill everything, just you need to kill very important things, like of course like that magic profane flesh, and Lethal Mirage is very good at rushing through Monoliths. This is like a monolith rushing build. Essentially, you just rush to the end of the objective, and then you, of course, reap the benefits of that. Now, it's not only that, it is now my official Tier 4 Jurla farmer. This is so satisfying to do T4 Jurla with. I am so happy I was able to do it. This is like absolute bare bones gear. Now, as you can tell in the footage, if you're paying close attention, I actually face tank an entire void basketball from Jurla, and that is because of all of the armor stacks from Perfection. Perfection gives us a bunch of base physical armor, and of course same as like Throne of Ambition, and both of these combined alongside all of our glancing blow and stuff is enough to make us tanky enough against T4 Jurla, which is of course very satisfying considering that this character is like 3 days old at most. There are some other things that this build does, like for instance, we have to run Apostasy to actually reach the glancing blow cap consistently on this build, because since we're being forced to run dual daggers in the dual dagger benefit on the top of Bladedancer is kind of shit for us because it's just poison chance, which does nothing for us, right? It means that we actually don't really reach glancing blow cap without apostasy. So our glancing blow is kind of like all over the place up until, of course, with better invested gear, where we can actually get a 100% chance of glancing blow without dust shroud investment. But thanks to dust shrouds and perfection giving us a bunch of flat dodge, which then gets turned into glancing blow, it's actually up most of the time. Sometimes you won't have glancing blow up, so you want to treat it like as if it's a layer of defense. So you don't want to rely upon it with this build until you have better gear. Think of it like a layer of block or something like that. And that's why we're stacking so much HP with the build. That's why we're at 2100 HP with a Bladedancer build. And this combined with endurance and of course the 24% less damage taken while at low life at the top of Bladedancer, it allows us to tank really big shots. Like for instance, the Void Basketball. And thankfully, thanks to stuff like Perfection giving us a bunch of free armor, and then of course, Throne of Ambition giving us a bunch of free armor percentage, all of this combined makes us really tanky in most boss fights, which is, of course, really good. And in Monolith, we're tanky against most things. If you don't have buffs up, you're going to be a little squishy. And against things like damage over time, you're supremely squishy, like every rogue build is, because Glancing Blows does not work on dots, because it only works on hits. So you have to be very careful. Make sure you save potions for cleansing dots, and you'll be just fine. Now, with all that being said, this has been the intro. Let's get in game, shall we? If you've enjoyed the content, if you've enjoyed last Epoch content, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as that's the best way of making sure that these videos, these types of videos where I play a build all the way from level 1 all the way to end game and solo self-found, so you guys can copy my path. It makes all these videos possible. So let's get in game, shall we? All right, here we are in game with the build. The build is a Bladedancer in SSF, level 94, 6 months. What the fuck? That's because I took a break. Now, the general skill rotation with the build, how you want to go about playing this build, is while in monoliths, okay, at the start of the monolith, you want to start a rotation. You have like a rotation to work with here. So you throw down your smoke bomb. Then you wait for this little thing. It'll tell you the active number of shadows. Shift, shadow, and then bam, the whole screen's dead, okay? And then after that, you want to throw down your decoy, wait for it to explode, dash 2 times, and then attack. And then throw down your smoke bomb, put in like some punctures for mana back, and rinse and repeat. This will make it so that you have 100% uptime on shadows while clearing monoliths, which is great because you want as many shadows as possible because you gain an absolute butt ton of more damage per shadow. So you want your shadows up all the time, right? Now for single target, you're just going to throw down your smoke bomb, throw down your decoys for armor shred, and then attack. You're doing about 200, 250 to 300k per Lightning Mirage. This is without shock. This is without Fulgerite shards with crit multi on them. If we had Fulgerite shards with crit multi, it could very easily get 300 per crit. We're missing a lot of gear in general. I'm missing increased damage idols. I'm missing 1 increased damage idol specifically. My boots suck. These could be melee crit multi boots very easily, as long as because I was getting ready to set up Solarion steps, but I never got lucky enough to drop a pair, so I ended up with the Terras. So that's another 100% crit multi. So this build is nowhere near enough invested in. And as well, we could have like an exalted +2 Mirage chest. If you have tier 6 or higher on the chest for Mirages, you get 2 instead of 1, which brings you up to 17 Mirages instead of 16, which is, of course, a really good investment. So yeah, lots of damage for a very cheap character, which is, of course, really good. Now, let's talk about skill choice, shall we? First skill, Lethal Mirage. You 100% want +2. This is one of those builds where the build won't feel like you eventually want +2. You don't need +2, quote unquote, to survive. You could like shave off some points here or there. You don't have to run Umbral Expanse or anything like that. I did fine until I got +2, but I heavily suggest getting +2 as quick as possible. I got really lucky with my relic. This is an absolute insane relic, but of course, I got lucky. Now, we take 2 points travel into Ravaging Mirage. If you have a +3 or a +4 for you manage to get extra points, I would put more points to Ravaging Mirage as it's just more damage. Then 1 point to Shadow Eater. This makes it so that whenever you have shadows, you consume them to make extra mirages. Now, this doesn't count as consumption of shadows for stuff like Umbral Blade's node here with Lethal Darkness. I mean, not Lethal Darkness. Where is it? It's somewhere here. Here it is. Shadows drop Umbral Blades. So when they expire or they're used, that doesn't count for Lethal Mirage for some reason, which is sad, but whatever. And then of course we can either make shadows with Decoy on Explosion and Shift, right? We can get up to 5 by shifting twice, or of course we throw down Smoke Bomb and wait 5 seconds. Now we have 4 points in Umbral Feast. This is like one of the best nodes in the tree. Gives you 40% more damage per shadow, which is up to 200% more damage. Best node in the tree. Then 1 point travel into Consuming Darkness. Whatever, health on kill, whatever, right? Mana gained on kill. Doesn't matter. It's like so inconsequential, it doesn't matter. Then 3 points travel into Mirage Creation Speed. So this is very fast in terms of creation speed. Like everything happens in like the blink of an eye. If you have more shadows, I believe it just makes the animation faster. It's the same amount of time every single time. So that's like how long you spend in invulnerability. Sometimes you have problems spending that little in invulnerability, like for instance, meteor chickens. You have to be very careful around meteor chickens because they will attack you where you stand. So they'll put meteors under your feet. So you need to be very careful in that regard. So be very careful with this node. Then 1 point to Synchronize. I only have 1 point because it's very efficient, because while we're in Monolith, we're killing like 6 things anyways with every Lethal Mirage, right? Like whatever trash it is. And that's enough cooldown reduction to bring us down to, I think, 5.6 seconds currently, right? Which is great. And of course, we want as many Mirages as possible. Same thing over here with Umbral Explains. Why am I going for as many Mirages as possible? Well, the way Lethal Mirage works is it will attack anything inside the AoE. So the faster you kill stuff, the faster the Mirages will go and attack other stuff in the AoE. And you want as many Mirages as possible so that you kill as many things as possible per click. Because our cooldown is very gated, right? We want to spam as many attacks as humanly possible in such a short amount of time to clear as much as possible. So you want as many Mirages as possible. Then, of course, we take 2 points into Sundering Blow for 60% more damage just for free, just from proccing bleed, thanks to Puncture with the global bleed stacks, thanks to this bleed chance, thanks to bleed chance from Shift. We essentially have 100% uptime on this on most things. Now, there is something to be said about grabbing into Shocking Grasp. There are going to be some changes in terms of melee adaptive damage. More news on that later when multiplayer comes around. So eventually Shocking Grasp might eventually be very good. It also makes it so that we can actually shock with our Lethal Mirage. The biggest problem is it makes it so that the only bleed we get is from, of course, Puncture. So this node would only be up on single target, which isn't a problem, right? Because it converts the bleed into that. Although, yeah, and it doesn't like change the requirement of this node, which is like whatever. It's like not a big problem. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Lethal Mirage tree. Now, there's something to be said. If you have more glancing, like the problem is right now is since we're forced to run double Fulgerite shards, we can't get like dodge chance on our weapons. We can't get access to stuff like weapons of choice for more glancing blow. So we're kind of in this weird spot where we only go glancing blow and we don't go dodge. And that's why I'm not grabbing to Rending Darkness. So what you can do is you can grab 4 points into this, get 800 flat dodge, and then grab Phantasmal Presence. This plus turning off Apostasy is a lot of dodge, and it makes the build feel really tanky. But of course, you'd lose access to the extra Mirages here, right? But this is definitely a route you can go if you want to feel tankier, because you'll get up to like 60% dodge for free. You won't have that glancing blow. So if you're farming T4 Jurla, this is useless because there's a lot of abilities that T4 Jurla has that aren't dodgeable. Or if you're farming like T4 Soulfire Dungeon, this is useless. But if all you're doing is farming monoliths, this is like absolutely insane, and I'll definitely drop all this. But since we were doing T4 Jurla, this is kind of like not worth your time, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it for Lethal Mirage. Puncture, TLDR, we want as much attack speed as possible. We want Fizz Shred stacks because we actually have a decent amount into physical damage thanks to the Fulgerite Shard's base of Obsidian Daggers, right? Of course, mana, we want as much mana as possible, want as much attack speed as possible, want as much bleed chance as possible. It's like a very simple tree, simple to understand. Now for shift here, shift is very, very, very important. So we're taking 3 points into velocity. Eventually I want to put 4 points into this, but right now we're grabbing swift recovery to make shift not cost much mana, so we're not like having to constantly spam puncture back for mana. Then of course, 4 points into Hyvolmia. This is great because it helps us reach the 15 stack on Sundering Blows quicker. Then 1 point travel into Jagged Cuts, and then 1 point to Critical Opening. This makes it so the next damaging non-channeled skill you use after shift is always a critical strike. This applies to every single attack inside Lethal Mirage. So for instance here, set it up. All 16 attacks, they're crit. That is because of critical opening. I have no investment into crit chance whatsoever. I do have some base crit because I am running double dagger. I technically have some crit, but I have no investment into crit. I have no investment into critical vulnerability, which saves us a bunch of points on the tree. I legitimately do not need crit at all. It is literally not worth it. So thanks to critical opening and being able to like just make everything crit. So you always need to make sure you're shifting before you Lethal Mirage. Otherwise you won't crit and you'll do poo-poo damage. Then, of course, we have 1 point travel to head trauma, then 3 points of Bazooka's hesitation. This is a bunch of increased damage. This is very important because half of our damage is physical, thanks to Fulgerite Shard, and then half of our damage is lightning, thanks to Fulgerite Shard. Meaning that we want as much increased generic damage as possible, and we don't want as much specific damage, like lightning damage, stuff like that. We want to be able to scale both sides at once. This will be alleviated when the melee, adaptive damage stuff comes in, but that will be later, right? So you want as much generic damage as possible, which is great because shift gives you that, right? So all of this combined, shift plus Lethal Mirage is like the whole, the good part of the build. Then of course for Smoke Bomb here, as much shadow chance as possible. So we make as many shadows per second. It's our main source of shadows for our Lethal Mirage. Get up to 5 shadows, bam, 5 extra mirages. You want max shadows all the time. Of course, Smoke Blades, this gives us 200% increased damage free, while we're standing in the Smoke Blade. It's generic damage, so it works, like I said, exactly like Bazookas. So that's why all of our increased damage is coming from. As you can tell, we're getting a lot of our damage for free, right? And that's why this build is so SSF friendly, is because I actually don't have that much damage on gear, at all. Look at my gloves. My gloves are absolute ass, right? My build, I am literally at the cheapest this build could possibly be, and it's great, and I love it. But yeah, all of our damage comes from our skills, which is great. And of course, duration, you want some glancing blow stuff, so you can cap on glancing blow. Watch how fast we cap glancing blow. Just a few seconds, bam, cap glancing blow, great. Of course, the Moonlight Bomb for the Silver Shroud. Silver Shrouds are always great. And then for Decoy, Decoy is set up specifically for a specific reason. First, we have Shrouded Core, and this in combination with Grain Diversion means that when we throw out our decoys, we get 3 shadows. This plus 2 shifts, which is very easy to do, means we get max shadows, which is great. That's the first part. And now we throw 3 decoys, and we have access to Sonic Detonation, and of course Earth Shatter. We apply 21 stacks of Armor Shred on the enemy, which is of course really, really, really freaking good, because that makes us do a lot more damage. So for reference, we're gonna do something without it and with it. We don't have any access to Armor Shred outside of Dummy, right? So we do like 200k, right? 200k, yada yada yada. Per. And we get up to like 250, 300k per crit, which is great because we don't have any access to armor shred because we don't have access to armor shred on our weapons. So relying upon this armor shred is great for us because we get a bunch of free damage for free. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Passives, there will be a link in the description of build planner. TLDR, most important nodes. Coated blades gives our lethal mirage 80% more damage. That's why we need puncture for mana. Then for Bladedancer specifically, you want as much crit multi as possible, so all in is great. 8 points in death swords because DR is great. You want all the perfection stuff because this is how you stack armor and dodge on a single target, and this makes it so you get 2 of those per stack. And of course, perfection stacks are great because increased damage generic is great for us. And that's pretty much it for that, and we don't take anything in marksman. Now for gearing, as you can tell, my gearing is shit, right? Like my helmet, this is like my best item, right? Increased damage while wielding a dagger, cooldown recovery speed, health, critical avoid, like 1 on Ember Visage base because you want as much crit multi as possible. Now, of course, this could be exalted cooldown recovery speed. This is only tier 3 cooldown recovery speed. It'd be much better than this and make our lethal mirage much more consistent, which would be great. Amulet, this is actually a really good amulet. I sealed off the minion health so I could actually add crit multi, lightning pen, life, and dodge. That's like, this is a really good amulet. Double Fulgerite shard. If you don't know how to get Fulgerite shards, use runes of creation. Runes of ascendance. Runes of ascendance on daggers, 50% of the time you'll get a Fulgerite shard, which is great, right? This means that this build is very SSF friendly. If you don't know how to get runes of ascendance, just spam rune nodes inside the monolith and you'll eventually drop them. They're not that rare, and you'll eventually have double Fulgerite shard eventually, right? And eventually when you want to farm more Fulgerite shards, you just want to farm rune nodes for even more runes of ascendance and try to go for double 1 LP Fulgerite shards, right? Chest, you want the +2 Mirage with the tier 6. You don't need tier 7, just tier 6. And then, of course, as much life as humanly possible. You could also get increased damage while wielding a dagger, like on the helmet, and that would be great too. Rings, I just went for flat dodge, res. Siphon of Anguish is great because since our lethal mirage is melee damage, this gives us 20% increased damage taken from the enemy. This is a really good roll. It's very easy to get LP Siphons of Anguish, as you can tell, in solo. So this is actually one of your best in slot rings, which is great. The Numer rings, we talked about the Numer rings on stream. They're really bad for this build specifically. Shadow Daggers doesn't work that well when you're running Fulgerite shards because, as you can tell, it says lightning damage with Lethal Mirage. So all of your other attacks deal no damage, which is fine. It's not a problem. Belt, I sealed away that mana regen so I can get Cleanse. Cleanse is very important on this build, on every rogue build, because poisons can kill you very quickly. HP is like easy. Gloves, you'd eventually want actual good gloves. I have bad gloves. This could be anything. It could even be a Ravenous Void. It could literally be anything. Specifically just stuff with like HP and stuff like that. Boots, a Terrace Path. This is just a slot in for crit multi boots solely on step, because we want crit multi on our boots, right? So we can get 100% extra crit multi. Right now we're at 325. This will bring us to 425, which would give us 25% more damage, which means that we would be hitting for like 350k per lethal mirage, which is great. And of course, this is like literally best in slot relic. You couldn't do better than this. This is legitimately like the best relic you can get. Now for idols, I really like Throne of Ambition. Throne of Ambition makes it so you can stack armor up on bosses. You get up to like 60% armor on bosses, which makes you feel really tanky on bosses. That combined with the glancing blow and all that makes it so that you can just face tank everything while you're waiting for your lethal mirage to come up. Makes it very casual friendly. And of course, we want as much AoE from our lethal mirage idols as possible. Now, what does this do? It makes it so the basic attack hits in a larger area, right? And that's very important because we want to be able to shotgun multiple packs. So for instance, you have a bunch of spiders, right? You want to be able to hit as many of those as possible per attack, because Lethal Mirage will then go instantly to the next mob, right? So you want to kill as many as possible in a short amount of time so that you clear everything on the screen, right? The more you kill, the better. And the AoE idols help a lot with this. Trust me. It may not seem like a lot, but once you actually start slotting these in, it feels so much better. The clear went from to amazing after this. Now, one thing you can do, you can run an extra Mirage idol when you're doing Monolith and then swap to this when you're doing Orbis or if you're doing Jurla. That's up to personal preference. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread from Epic Builds. Off to go make another build. Bye.